All right, tons of debate to get to from yesterday's nearly 5-hour committee hearing in the Illinois House dealing with House Bill 5855. That's the measure to ban nearly 100 semi-automatic rifles, shotguns, and pistols, but also would ban the possession of certain types of magazines that hold more than 10 rounds and prohibit anyone under the age of 21 from getting a firearm owner identification card. That would obviously raise a lot of questions about the constitutionality of all of this. We'll try to get some of your phone calls in later on, but I've got tons to get through with yesterday's hearing. And we start with Cook County Sheriff Tom Dart, who addressed the committee as a panel of different law enforcement officials. He supports the idea of banning certain types of semi-automatic weapons. And here is some of what Tom Dart had to say. He even brought some props with him to lay out for the committee people to see in front of them when he talks about large capacity magazines. So here is Cook County Sheriff Tom Dart.
These are everywhere, and we need something done now. We need it done now. The lethality is absolutely amazing. If you ever tried to witness someone shooting with one of these things, when they put it on fully automatic, the chances of them actually hitting the person they're aiming is infinitesimal. That's not going to happen. What's going to happen is innocent people all around are going to get slaughtered. That's what's going to happen. These things are designed for that. There is no sane person who's going to sit there and say, in our society, we should have these. And you know, folks, we all will be judged by history. We will. And I'll tell you what, 100 years from now, when they look at this era and what was going on, and the violence upon our children and innocent people each and every day, they're going to look back on us, and history is not going to be kind. And you know what? We own it. We own it. Each and every person who sits there and makes up some fantasy of why these are okay. They have some role in our society. They make up these fantasies year in, year out, and why we should have these things. That is wrong. They know they're lying. They know that. And what's happening is people are dying. And we need to do something about it. And that's why, you know, Bob, when you called me about this, I couldn't wait to get here today. Because the notion that something's going to get done to help our communities, oh my God, do we need this?
So Cook County Sheriff Tom Dart laying out why he supports banning certain types of weapons, and a whole host of other debate was had, including a presentation by the Illinois State Police Director Brendan Kelly. And he was also asked questions by Savannah Republican State Representative Tony McCombie, the incoming House Republican leader. And here's some of what the State Police Director had to say, and the questions and the responses.
In a timely manner. Anytime the Illinois State Police have had any issues complying with statutory things, it's because we've had instability. You can look at the funds that were swept in 15 and 17 that created some instability within the Firearms Safety Bureau, and that led to, in part, some of the backlogs we had with avoid and concealed carry. We are well within the statutory timeframes now because we've had stability in that funding, the ability to plan for hiring, the ability to plan for new technology to be implemented, and that has allowed us to bring those numbers down. My feeling is the Illinois State Police, you give us enough resources, we can put a man on the moon if that's what the General Assembly wants us to do. Looking at the mission that is outlined here within this bill, we believe we can accomplish that, and we'll be able to answer ready so long as we have that support and those resources.
I presume there's hundreds of thousands of these listed firearms legally owned today, and if this passes, they won't be. How are you going to enforce compliance?
And that will be part of our normal enforcement efforts. When we find something that is not in compliance with the law, either because it's a prohibitor or it's a ghost gun or it's a switch or whatever the case may be that makes it unlawful, that will just be one of the categories that our folks will be enforcing as they come across these firearms. But in terms of the individuals who will be allowed to retain them and they'll be allowed to keep them, that's what some of those additional resources we'll need for the unsworn personnel to set up essentially kiosks to make it convenient for folks to be able to do the process that's outlined in this legislation, so they can keep those. The information is on file with the Illinois State Police pursuant to the statute. That'll be less of an enforcement mechanism and more of a compliance mechanism.
your resources that you have today, and this is just really for the public, I mean, is that going to be utilized to target high-profile individuals or, social media folks that are today law-abiding, but if this passes, will not be? How are you going to, I guess, can I have your assurance that those folks aren't going to be targeted?
Absolutely. They will not be. We take our commitment to due process and our commitment to protecting everyone's rights, whatever amendment the Bill of Rights it is, we take those rights seriously. And we only investigate things when there's reasonable suspicion, there's probable cause, there's various legal standards that allow us to be able to use any of the tools we have, whether it's just conducting investigation on the street or anywhere out there in the community, or it's online, it's on the dark web, on whatever medium it is or whatever environment it is, our folks are doing their job. We have to adhere strictly to the Constitution.
So that is Illinois State Police Director Brendan Kelly testifying yesterday at that House hearing, which was nearly 5 hours long. We've got so much more to get to. We'll hear from some of the opponents, including the Illinois State Rifle Association and Todd Vandermyde, who's a very outspoken gun owner rights individual. So stay tuned. That's coming up here with Springfield's Morning News on 92.7 WMAY. We may also try to get some of your phone calls at 217-629-7970.
92.7 WMAY.
Springfield's News and Talk.
Well, we're back and delving deep into the arguments heard during a nearly 5-hour House hearing on House Bill 5855. That's the measure to ban certain types of semi-automatic rifles, pistols, shotguns, and magazines over 10 rounds. And we've heard all kinds of supporters from Moms Demand Action, GPAC, even Cook County Sheriff Tom Dart. Not necessarily indicative of all of law enforcement's sentiments, but still some interesting comments made and the props that were brought up as well. But let's hear some of the opponents. Illinois State Rifle Association's already said they plan to sue and they're not negotiating on a gun ban. Ed Sullivan was at the hearing yesterday, and here's some of what he had to say as part of the Illinois State Rifle Association's testimony.
I'm going to quote from Sharon Mitchell, Cook County Public Defender. He wrote an op-ed that basically said there's no Second Amendment on the South Side. He also, that op-ed was in favor of the Bruin decision that you're going to hear from Mr. Vandermyde at the end of this. And I quote, "The truth is, laws criminalizing gun possession not only devastate Black and brown communities, they also fail to achieve one of their primary objectives, reducing the supply of guns on our streets." I didn't say that. Someone that should know better, that has seen the violence, that has helped communities be restored, said that. Bottom line is this bill keeps alive systemic racism as it applies to the Second Amendment. I can take my firearms, my mags, I can go across the border, I have the means. What about the people that don't? What about the people you're just going to criminalize them? There's over 70 counties in Illinois that are 2A sanctuary counties. Those folks aren't going to get arrested. So who do you think is going to get charged with a Class 2 felony? I think we should listen to Mr. Mitchell.
So Sullivan making the case of the possibility of this being disproportionately enforced on minority communities, and that's a big problem. You also had Todd Vandermyde. He's a former lobbyist for the National Rifle Association. He was also with the Federal Firearms Licensees of Illinois, but now he's retired, but still very much active in advancing gun owners' rights. And while you heard a lot of the proponents of banning guns saying, hey, there's some federal court cases out there that say you can ban certain magazines or guns, those aren't all the way up to the U.S. Supreme Court. And that's something that Todd Vandermyde yesterday in front of the House committee, he presented some of the arguments that are now what are courts supposed to be looking at from the U.S. Supreme Court when it comes to guns. Here's Todd Vandermyde from yesterday.
If a ban on semi-automatic guns and large capacity magazines reduces the perceived risk from mass shootings and makes the public feel safer, as a result, that's a substantial benefit. if it makes them feel safer, is the exact interest balancing approach that the Supreme Court in New York has rejected and forbidden. 4 times in the Friedman decision, they used intermediate scrutiny in their discussion. And then they went on to say the features prohibited by Highland Park's ordinance were not common in 1791. Most guns available then could not fire more than 1 shot without being reloaded. Heller explicitly addressed this issue. Quote, some have made the argument, bordering on the frivolous, that only those arms in existence in the 18th century are protected by the Second Amendment. We do not interpret constitutional rights that way. Just as the First Amendment protects modern forms of communication and the Fourth Amendment applies to modern forms of search, the Second Amendment extends prima facie to all instruments that constitute bearable arms, even those that were not in existence at the time of the founding. Friedman got it wrong at every turn. The table has been reset, according to the judges of the Seventh Circuit Court of Appeals at oral arguments last month. One judge, the chief judge, going so far as to say that the Second Amendment has gone from a second-class right to a supercharged right. And I'm here to tell you that the gun owners are tired of being blamed for every madman, every criminal, and every other depraved act that 2.5 million gun owners didn't do.
So Vandermyde also talked about just the enforcement mechanism here and how indeed this is going to be enforced if it's ever implemented and survives some kind of court challenge that's expected to go all the way to the U.S. Supreme Court. So here's more of Vandermyde speaking yesterday at a nearly 5-hour House committee hearing on the proposed gun ban.
I don't know how you're going to enforce this. You can't put us all in jail. Your new bail law just said you can't do that. You will have civil disobedience to where people aren't going to register things. They're not going to surrender things. They're not going to turn them in. So I ask you, what is the enforcement mechanism? Are you going to send the state police house to house? Because as one local law enforcement chief put it in my area, he said, Todd, you're telling me that I have to go potentially arrest my neighbors, people I go to church with, the people on my son's football squad, the people that come over and barbecue, the guys I see in the bar, they're all now felons? I don't think that question has been thoroughly thought through. And so, with that, I think you're going down the wrong road. And to sit there and criminalize 2.5 million people in this state, the numbers that we're talking about here are staggering. And
so Vandermyde highlighting again just how this doesn't seem like it's enforceable, especially, again, when you have 70-plus sanctuary counties for the Second Amendment in Illinois. Fascinating, and, of course, we got more coming up of the debate. We'll take one call here before the break. Good morning. You're on WMAY.
Devil's advocate, Greg, because I'm on your side, brother. Justice Alito cited Sir Matthew Hale from the 1700 Salem witch trial. So when it comes to citing things from way back when and going, oh, that can't have anything to do with today, don't worry. Alito set precedent for that. So,
well, but the same can be said about a variety of other old Supreme Court decisions or old statements and writings. I think the Supreme Court recently stated something, and even Sullivan mentioned this when we heard him, and even Vandermyde. You can't take a person's First Amendment rights as based off of what they wrote back in the late 1700s. If that's the case, then you wouldn't be able to make this phone call if it was regulated.
Sure, and I kind of feel like that kind of goes both ways. So I'm not trying to do whataboutism. I'm just playing the devil's advocate.
Right, well, we'll hear more. We'll hear more of the debate from the hearing. So I definitely want to give plenty of time for that. Got to take a break though here with Springfield's Morning News on WMAY.
Springfield's Morning News with Greg Bishop. Weekdays 6 till 9 on 92.7 WMAY.
All right, hearing more from yesterday's nearly 5-hour-long House hearing on a proposal to ban certain types of semi-automatic weapons and magazines over 10 rounds. We've been hearing from the opposition after a slew of proponents from Moms Demand Action to GPAC and more saying that we should ban these weapons. But opponents pushing back, saying there's a Second Amendment and a well-regulated militia being necessary for the security of a free state. The right of the people to keep and bear arms shall not be infringed. We'll hear a little bit more of that coming up. But Ed Sullivan, he's with the Illinois State Rifle Association. He, again, reiterated that the State Rifle Association is not willing to negotiate on a proposed gun ban.
When you ask for a gun ban, there is not a place that we can go where we can go and negotiate that. There's certain red lines in the sand. And I hate to say that, but there is.
But what kind of negotiation could possibly happen? State Representative LawShawn Ford, who we talked with earlier this week, he talked about, how he's cognizant of the possibility of enhanced penalty enforcement against minority communities, and that's something that may need to be addressed here. But he also heard from some of the opponents of banning guns saying that they support the idea of more resources for certain parts of Chicago, for instance. Here's Representative LawShawn Ford.
And so do I have your support as the NRA members to advocate and stand with us to fight for more resources for the West Side? Because you know what, I might just abandon my members on the Democratic side if you guys could help me bring a whole bunch of money to the West Side, because you guys might have a solution here. So it might just be putting lots of money on the West Side.
Representative, let me give you a statistic.
Yeah, I think you ought to put more money on the West Side, build more stuff. Don't gentrify it and run everybody out. That'll put more of my members and hopefully more of your guys to work too. I'd love to see that, because if they're busy doing that, they're productive people in society. I disagree with the way the marijuana issue was treated and stuff like that. I disagree with the fact that, medical marijuana cards are prohibited under the federal law. You turn around and look at our bail stuff. One thing you guys didn't do, if I get arrested on a battery because some guy grabbed my wife's behind at a bar and I took a poke at him, the minute I'm arrested and that goes into the system, my FOID card's revoked on the arrest, even though the simple battery is not a disqualifying offense. If I get supervision on that, they will take my FOID card and my guns and make me do something else with them, all for issues that are not disqualifying offenses. How does that impact your community when people who get low-level charges and are trying to be law-abiding gun owners now fall into this claptrap to where they have to surrender their FOID card, surrender all their guns, move them out of the house and stuff like that? There's a bail reform thing that I think hurts a lot of people across this state that's not being addressed. I think it's unconstitutional the way it's written. But there are a host of things we can work on.
So hearing a little bit of an idea of what could happen outside of banning guns. And we heard earlier in the debates on this about people saying it's about the hearts and the minds of bad actors that needs to be a focus. But Representative Denyse Stoneback, she is a Democrat and a organizer of a gun control group. She was a lobbyist before becoming a lawmaker. She tried to press members that were in opposition to this about what the Second Amendment means. And again, a well-regulated militia being necessary for the security of a free state, the right of the people to keep and bear arms shall not be infringed. Apparently, she says on the NRA headquarters in Washington, D.C., it only has half of that. I don't know that, but here's Denyse Stoneback talking a bit about the Second Amendment from her understanding.
Because we have in HB 5855 regulations around firearms. And on the building of the headquarters of the organization that you represent, there is half of the Second Amendment.
But the other half is, of course, this shall not be infringed. It's kind of fascinating to hear her argue that a well-regulated militia means to provide for laws and regulations. And I think that you can push back on that and say, well, no, a well-regulated militia means having something that's in good working order. But all in all, after 5 hours, State Representative Justin Slaughter, who chairs the committee, he said that they're not done yet. There's still a lot more to debate on all of this.
Obviously, this plane has not landed. With that said, this is our last hearing this year. this calendar year. As I stated in the beginning, please look forward to more robust discussion and more hearings.
So we'll obviously be covering all of that and more right here with Springfield's Morning News. I'm Greg Bishop. You can follow me on Twitter, Facebook, YouTube, where we stream live as well. Be sure to like and subscribe, hit that notification and all of that. Ding, ding, ding. All right. Springfield's Morning News. Again, I'm Greg Bishop. Much more coming up.